Welcome to our second annual program for the VOB108. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you to do a couple of things. One is if you'll stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Seats, please. My name is Dan Sack. I'm on the Executive Committee of VOB108. And in just a minute, I'm going to ask our Chairman, Bill Brownsberger, to come up and welcome you. But before we do, even though you've already eaten, I'm going to ask my wife to come up and lead us in blessing the food.
Please bow your heads. Dear God, thank you for the many, many generous men and women in our country who daily put their lives on the line. Thank you very much for these gentlemen and ladies who are here, who have either been in the service or who have supported the people who were on the lines so many, many years ago and continue to give back to our organizations and communities. We appreciate and honor their sacrifice and all the many things that they have done for us and continue to do. As a nation, we would not be where we are with all this sacrifice and doing the things that they did. And dear God, please bless this food that we are about to partake and give it to us to heal our bodies, minds, and spirits. I would like to ask God to also protect our men and women that continue to be on the lines, and also to guide our people in Washington, D.C. as they go forward with the many decisions that affect everyone in the country and throughout the world. Amen.
Amen. He's much better at that than I am, so that's my wife, Frances. I'm going to ask Bill Brownsberger to step up here and welcome you.
I'm Bill Brownsberger. I'm chairman of VOB108, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the executive board, and I would like to introduce the executive board. You already met Dano. He's our NOVOVA liaison. I'll let him explain what NOVOVA means. You may or may not have met the XO, David Ezrati. David's planned and organized the whole event here. So if we do anything well or bad, let him know. Okay. Also, Paul Salchek is our civilian liaison. Paul is our procurement techie. And Bob Liebeck, who was out of registration, he had another commitment. He's the treasurer. And Earl, where are you? Earl Gregorich is our media director. Earl's also SBDC over at Wright State, so he wears a couple hats, several hats. Did I miss anybody? Frank Hickman. Where's Captain Spurs? Captain Spurs, the old cavalry officer. He just hangs around because he likes me. So thank you for all coming. We try to do this normally in the month of October. And we try to reach out and touch business owners, primarily veteran business owners, service disabled veteran business owners, and get you to network with one another. I need to introduce Dennis D. Millay. Dennis, can you stand up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ball guy.
So Dennis is a force within the veteran community, veterans' rights, an activist. And Dennis, you want to tell us? You want to say anything?
Just support the military, past, present, and future. We need that quite a bit. Washington, D.C. only has 135 active representatives that have been elected to Congress that are former veterans. That's it. So out of the 535, that's it. There are more across the country that are running. I'm helping about 4 or 5 run their campaigns right now, but they don't have a sense of reality of what's going on in our DoD forces. The dollar was being reduced. I just attended a conference with Leon Panetti, Secretary of Defense, and they're scared to death what Congress is going to ask them to do. And when they cut dollars back, it doesn't just affect us, it affects the world, like we mentioned before, because we do support the world for democracy. So just keep supporting us. That's what we need. And write your congressmen and senators, by all means. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome. Hope the event lives up to my expectations. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's the end of our pre-lunch program. You probably are wondering what VOB108 is, and David Israeti's going to come back after lunch and tell us what that is, and then we'll have Col Moe as our speaker, so enjoy your lunch.
Our Master of Ceremonies just got back from being interviewed by Channel 7, who also came out and interviewed Col Moe, so look for this on the evening news. But I hope I can talk while you can eat. I think most of you were in the military, so you should have already been done by now. I don't know what's the problem. So, big question for those of you who are familiar is, what is VOB108? And I made it really simple. VOB stands for Veteran-Owned Business. And the 108, well, we were a little misguided, and it was from House Bill 108, which really wasn't the right bill necessarily. But the right bill, or the right executive order, came out on October 20th of 2004, and it was signed by George W. Bush, and it said the President must establish a goal of not less than 3% for participation by service-disabled veteran businesses in federal contracting. The part that's missing there is the part about we will shoot any government contractor that doesn't meet the goal. But at this point, almost all the federal agencies are failing miserably, but that's pretty much the state of affairs of the federal government in general. So, we began back in 2005, and it really sort of started a little before that. There was a course offered by the Kauffman Foundation on entrepreneurship, and it was targeted towards veterans, and there must have been some big grant. And the offer was, you pay $300 and take this course, and you'll get $600 worth of credit at the Gateway store on completion. I don't know about you, but that sounded like a pretty good deal to me, and apparently also to Captain Brownsberger here. We sat there in the room, and for the better part of 3 months, if there was, if it was north, he was north, I was south. If it was up, he was up, I was down. We were polar opposites. Got through the thing, and we decided we should team up, because we really, both of us, the aim was to learn about how to do business with the government. And that really hadn't been explained. So we had Bill, me, soon joined by Bob Liebeck, who's now our treasurer, Earl, and Frank, who at that point didn't have a veteran-owned business, but would soon. Or they sort of had one, but they still had a full-time paycheck from somewhere else. And that was really the core 5 people that started this organization, and actively 4 of them are still on the board. Any volunteers? So we started out with having once a month meetings, and we tried to bring in speakers who could help us crack the code at how to get across the fence. And we learned about things like cage codes and CCR, and we ran into Dennis. And from then on, our heads were spinning with all the things we could be doing if we only knew how. And we progressed, and we started to grow. But the real big changes started around 2008. That's when we became the NAVOBA affiliate for Southwest Ohio, and Mr. Sack joined us. NAVOBA stands for the National Association of Veteran-Owned Businesses, or the National Veteran-Owned Business Association, or whatever you want to call it. And had we made a smart move, we would have researched a little better and found out, yeah, there are some other organizations across the country doing the same exact thing that we are. We just thought we were the first, blazed ahead on our own with no guidance, sort of like the military. Out in California, there's a group called the Elite VOB organization. There's some in Texas. And the more we found out, the more backwards we found Ohio was in recognizing veteran-owned businesses in terms of contracting. And Ohio still is not one of the veteran-friendly states, but we're working on that, and we're hoping Col Moe is going to help us move forward on that. In 2010, we had our first Vet Biz Now session. We had a speaker from Washington, Scott Deniston, who had been the head of the VA's veteran business movement, and he had split off and was working for NAVOBA at the time when we signed him up, but by the time he came here, he was no longer working for NAVOBA. And we had about 70 people here, and we made some pretty good contacts with local businesses, large local businesses, the main one being Teradata, who actually asked a bunch of our members to come in and talk to the COO. Nothing became of it, but we at least got our foot in the door. And we also became a 501c6, which means we are now a 100% nonprofit organization, much like Dayton Defense. In fact, we sort of stole their charter to get this. We stole it so bad, we still had their name in it in a few spots when we first turned it in. So, moving forward, 2011, that's today, this year, Mr. Sack ran, along with Earl, a very successful, for the rookie season, our first Vetrepreneur Academy, where we had veterans teaching other veterans about how to run a business and how to do the sort of things that we all were learning when we first started out. And we've got a few of the people here that actually took the class, or a few of the classes, and we yet built more connections, and we offered consulting services, all subsidized through a grant from the state, right? Earl, it was from the state.
Right.
And we've got some of those people trying to grow their businesses and hopefully join up with our membership. One of them's paid his membership dues today, so move forward. And then today we have our second Vet Biz Now session with Col Moe. What comes next? 2012. I hear we have an opening starting in January for a new commanding officer. Captain Brownsberger is deciding to retire. The rest of it is pretty much up to the people in this room and the people who've come to our meetings. And again, we meet the second Thursday of every month. We meet at DeVry University. They've been gracious enough to lend us space right across from 675. We meet from noon to about 1:30 or 2. You can have pizza brought out there and partake for $5, or you can just come for free. You don't have to be a member to attend these meetings. The second meeting of the month is the fourth Thursday of every month, and that's an executive board meeting, same place. And again, if you want to come, it's open to anybody, and we generally discuss what we're going to do next. So those meetings are much shorter. Some other next steps. We need the state of Ohio to recognize VOBs as preferred vendors for contracting and for acquisitions. I'm kind of shocked that we're still in a state where you can be from India and get preference over a veteran. And we need to really push that through. Secondly, we need to make sure we've got a unified message and get that message out to people that veteran-owned businesses are here. We're small businesses. We're the engine that makes this economy work, and that we want the large contractors, and there's quite a few of them right here around Dayton, to meet that 3% requirement of service-disabled veterans-owned businesses. And we're working to get veteran-owned businesses the same sort of recognition as the service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. And last but not least, we need to recruit more of you to be a part of this organization so that we can find a replacement for this guy. And for right now, those of you who are in the organization, Captain Brownsberger, step up. I'd like the rest of you guys to stand up. And I haven't done this to anybody for a while since I've been in uniform. But thank you, sir.
Please take your seats. This is totally unexpected by me. David and I share a vision of veterans doing business with other veterans. And it's 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I was north and David was south. We're still that way today. Don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah. But we're kind of yin and yang. But it is a possibility if you just visualize veterans supporting veterans. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. I have a small machine shop here in Dayton, and I have goods and services that I purchase. I'd much rather purchase them from a brother or sister that is a veteran, as no offense to the civilians, but I'd rather do business with a veteran. So if you have any idea or beliefs, that's my core belief, is veterans need to support veterans. So that's what VOB 108 is really all about, and what brought the South to the North, and the North to the South. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, David. Nice job. It always makes me nervous. Excuse me, nervous when I'm about to introduce somebody and they're not in the room. So, Joe, is Joe in the room?
He just ran out too.
All right. I learned a long time ago. I've done these master of ceremonies things. Always check that the guy didn't go to the bathroom first. Is he here, Joe?
Yes.
Okay. So I can get started.
He's waiting to make a grand entrance.
Okay, great. Let me give you a little background on how Colonel Moe came here. A good friend of mine, Bill Kutuk, and his wife Ellen are here. If you raise your hand so you can see who these nice people are. Bill and I play a lot of golf together in Middletown, and so being a Vietnam vet, Bill's ROTC officer from Virginia Tech. How could I ever forget that? He tells me that all the time. Okay? Don't forget. But anyway, we tell a lot of war stories together, and he said that, I went to school and church with Tom Moe, and I was just blown away. So we spent a lot of time talking about that over the last couple of years. And as David said, we had Scott Dennison here last year, and we were looking for a speaker this year, and I said, I've got a guy that knows Col Tom Moe. And the executive committee said, you're kidding me. Well, we got to see if he'll come here. So he's here, and so I thank Bill and Ellen. Ellen was in school with Col Moe also, so back in Arlington. So, but I want to introduce Col Tom Moe. I'm going to call him Col Moe. He said Tom's okay, and I said, well, if I call a senator the rest of his life, I can call you Colonel the rest of your life because you earned it. So, Col Tom Moe the U.S. Air Force, retired, continued more than 45 years of military and public service when he joined the cabinet of Governor John Casey on January 10th of this year. Col Moe attended Capital University, graduated in 1965 with a Bachelor of Arts degree, and received his regular commission in the U.S. Air Force through ROTC. In 1967, he entered advanced training in the F-4 aircraft and was assigned to combat duty in Da Nang. He flew 85 combat missions, including 60 over North Vietnam. In 1968, His F-4 Phantom was forced down by a weapon malfunction about 20 miles into enemy territory. Although he was able to evade capture for 3 days, he was eventually captured and held as a POW for over 5 years until his release during Operation Homecoming in 1973. Colonel Moe attended the University of Notre Dame, earning a Master's of Arts degree in Government Soviet and Eastern European Area Studies. And in 1995, he retired after serving 30 years of active duty in the Air Force and having served in a number of command and staff positions, including commander of the Combat Ready Fighter Squadron and vice commander of the U.S. Air Force Logistics Command Office of the Inspector General. He earned 24 awards and decorations, including 2 Silver Stars, Defense Superior Service Medal, 2 Legions of Merit, the Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star Medal for Valor, 2 Purple Hearts, and 7 Air Medals. Absolutely, nice job. Colonel Moe has served as director of the Ohio Troops for Teachers program for the Ohio Department of Education, was later director of the Fairfield County Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. There's more in there, but you want to hear more from Colonel Moe and less from me. Colonel Moe and his wife Christine reside in Lancaster. They are the parents of Connie, Eric, and Ryan. In August 2010, he donated a kidney to his daughter Connie, who was suffering from kidney disease. Col Tom Moe.
There, I touch this. Is that coming through? I've got my water here, and get the mic close to me because I'm losing my voice a little bit, so I appreciate your patience with me, and thank you for the very kind introduction. My mom wrote that. Bill knew my mom. Bill's mom is still doing great, living in North Carolina.
South Carolina.
South, oh my gosh. There is a difference. Bill's dad was my scoutmaster, and then my friend Vic Barnett is here. We served on the War College together. A couple of blue suiters up there in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And some other new friends of mine that I just met recently. It's important as I go through my presentation today that you know that they're here. The representatives running our Montgomery County Veteran Service Office. So wave your hands, and thanks for being here today. It's really, really neat that you're here to really, if you want to see anybody about veteran services when we're done, and I'll make the point that veteran services in Ohio, where the rubber meets the road, is at the county level, and I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you. So let's get started, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. I actually have notes. Most fighter pilots can't read, but these are really short. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. And by way of introduction, we need to turn the clock back to the Civil War, actually, and the compassion of President Lincoln. President Lincoln's second inauguration took place in March of 1865, and it was a time of very wet weather. Pennsylvania Avenue had become a sea of mud, pools of water, and if you've been around D.C., that's about the way it is today, I guess. No, it was a lot more swampy back then, but there are no fewer mosquitoes today, I don't think. Thousands of spectators stood around actually in the mud on the Capitol grounds to hear the president, who stood on the east portico to take the executive oath. And the Capitol Dome had just received his crowning Statue of Freedom barely 14 months earlier. And it stood over President Lincoln as he took the oath. It was a physical reminder, the Statue of Freedom, of the iron resolve of President Lincoln and his administration through the years of war. And as was typical for President Lincoln, his speech was not long, but it spoke of his resolve to see the war through to a successful conclusion. It wasn't over yet. To achieve a just settlement and to care for its veterans. He concluded with the following words: with malice toward none, with charity for all, and he's speaking north and south, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow, and for his orphan, to do all we may achieve and cherish, so that we have a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Lincoln's challenge to take care of our veterans was answered positively around the country, and Ohio was one of the leaders in establishing a firm set of benefits and institutions for our veterans. Unfortunately, President Lincoln would not live to see the results. In a little more than a month, he would be assassinated. Well, let's take a minute to review what the term veteran means and how we've cared for veterans throughout our history, especially here in Ohio. The most common use of the word veteran is in reference to former armed forces personnel, and that is a person who served in the armed forces, not just someone who had served in the armed forces in combat. It's especially applied to those who serve an entire career, usually about 20 years, but it really can be applied to anyone who served just one tour of duty, and it's something that we hammer home, and I'm sure you do here in Montgomery County when we're looking for our veterans. Many women have also served in the United States military over our 200-year history, although sometimes in the early years, to do so, they had to disguise themselves as men. Regrettably, female veterans have often been looked down on by their male counterparts. And as a matter of fact, women were not even recognized as veterans until after World War II. Therefore, prior to that, they were not even eligible for VA benefits. Yet today, the VA estimates that women make up 40% of the veterans population. Nevertheless, women veterans often don't self-identify themselves as veterans, even if they identify themselves as having served in the military. So when we're out there trying to link veterans to their benefits, we ask people if they've served in the military instead of asking them if they're a veteran. Even though they would be a veteran, they don't associate sometimes this. And so it is that our wars have produced millions of veterans over the years, men and women, beginning in the earliest colonial times. In World War II alone, we produced over 16 million American veterans. A major step in providing support to those veterans, in keeping with Lincoln's promise, took place in 1944. President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act in 1944, better known as the GI Bill of Rights. This bill has been called by some historians the most important piece of legislation since the Homestead Act. And it was drafted by the American Legion, one of the important veteran service organizations that still exists to this day. The bill provided for tuition, books, and living expenses for up to 4 years of college or vocational schools, and was signed into law that year, 1944. It made low-interest mortgages available to homeowners and farm and small business loans at low interest as well. There was also a $20 a week allowance. Doesn't sound like much, but it was then. This allowance was for vets returning from war and looking for employment. The bill also established veterans hospitals and provided for veteran rehabilitation for those who were disabled. The impact of the GI Bill was immense. Over 1 million veterans enrolled in college in 1946 alone, and by 1956, over 10 million veterans had used their educational benefits. And from 1944 to 1949, nearly 9 million veterans received close to $4 billion from the Unemployment Compensation Program. Further educational assistance acts were passed in the following years for the benefits of veterans of the Korean War, the Vietnam era, the Persian Gulf War, and the All-Volunteer Force. The establishment of the Veterans Administration, or the VA, came in 1930 when Congress authorized the President to consolidate and coordinate activities affecting war veterans. A number of existing component agencies that have served veterans up to this time became bureaus within the VA. The responsibilities and benefits of the programs grew enormously over the following 60 years. In 1973, the Veterans Administration assumed another major responsibility when the National Cemetery System, except for Arlington National Cemetery, was transferred to the VA for the Department of the Army, and so it is to this day. Congress continued to expand coverage of veterans' benefits with each year. The Readjustment Benefit Act of 1966 extended these benefits to all who served in the armed forces, even those who served in peacetime. And the GI Bill has been updated from time to time, including the Montgomery GI Bill and post 9/11 GI Bill. Today, we are still, unfortunately, but necessarily sending our fellow citizens to wars around the world. The DoD reports that there are over 2,500 Ohioans currently deployed to our wars overseas. And my own chief counsel, Mr. Hannon, now Sergeant Hannon, is off to Afghanistan for the third time, a National Guardsman. Since 9/11, there have been about 65,000 Ohioans deployed. And with that, the casualties go on. Ohio's number of killed in action since March of 2003, the beginning of the Iraq War, stands at 250. We endeavor each day to comfort the grieving families and assist our wounded veterans. Certainly work remains to be done to help correct the social problems affecting these veterans. According to the VA, there are more than, nationwide, 299,000 veterans homeless on any given night. The Secretary of the VA has made it a goal to resolve the issue in the next few years, and this is a mountainous task. I look forward to doing whatever we can to take part in that battle. In addition, some veterans of the Gulf War are finding recognition of their medical maladies, such as Gulf War syndrome. Certainly, disabled veterans have and continue to face many challenges. A number of these that we've identified recently that were right staring us in the face are PTSD. Just not too many years past, the effects of PTSD were considered other social ills and so forth, and we didn't get to the root of it. And then we have traumatic brain injury, which in itself adds to the PTSD problem, and we're dealing with that and the consequences for the individual and for society. Well, in spite of continuing and even these new challenges that I mentioned, the U.S. over time and Ohio have looked relatively well after its veterans and their families. Of course, we know every day that we can do better. To better serve all veterans, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, still called the VA, was established as a cabinet-level position in 1989. And then you saw throughout the country, not every state, but many states, like Ohio, 3 years ago, established Veteran Services as a cabinet-level position. Very useful to have that access that we have as a cabinet member, not only with our governor, but with our legislators in Columbus and also in Washington. This reconfigured VA continues to be responsible for providing federal benefits to veterans and their dependents. And I've got some numbers here I want to reel off just to give you an idea of the scope. The benefits and services include 163 VA hospitals throughout the U.S., 850 ambulatory care and community-based outpatient clinics. These CBOCs are located not in every county, but are often in filler spots around the state that a veteran can go to and not have to go to a more distant hospital. There are 137 VA nursing homes. This is once again nationwide. 43 domiciliaries. I would call them domicile, but not the VA. And 73 comprehensive home care programs. In addition, the VA operates 206 vet centers, and these are established to establish psychological counseling for veterans, especially in light of our increasing understanding of the effects of PTSD. To receive medical benefits from the VA, a veteran who served prior to September 1980 must have served at least 180 days on active duty, or, if after that date, must have served at least 24 months. If the veteran was medically discharged and receives a VA service-connected disability stipend, the time limits are not applicable. Now, I mentioned the number of VA facilities throughout the country, and a little later I'll show you the VA facilities that are here in Ohio. And indeed, the VA is complemented by state agencies, and we set our own criteria for state level benefits, and there are many of them, and I'll list those a little later for you. And I've already mentioned that Ohio is not completely unique, but is unique among those states, for example, our neighbor to the south, which does not have county level veterans offices. And this is really important, excuse me. Not only are our benefits extended at the county level, but when you go into the county office, you're dealing with a neighbor. There's no one in the system, it's certainly not the VA or me sitting in the Rife Tower in Columbus, knows the needs of a person in Montgomery County or Benton County, as well as the folks who live there. Even though I visited all those counties, or I'm nearly done, I got 5 to go, I'll still never get to know the neighbors like our individual county veteran service officers will know. Well, let's go back for a moment to the Civil War period and see how benefits for veterans are taking shape. As a result of the Civil War, the federal government founded a national home for disabled soldiers, and one of these national homes was established in Dayton. Now referred to as a community living center, the large state and VA hospital is also located there, as well as the National Cemetery. Has anybody ever been out there to the VA hospital? It's at least the previous structure and campus was huge. I've Googled the pictures from the old days, and even though there's still a good facility there, it was so fancy with parks and lakes and fountains and stuff that it was a tourist destination. But this was the commitment established by President Lincoln to establish these widespread and very, very fine veterans facility. And we are proud that one of the first ones was in Dayton. Many states followed, including Ohio, followed the lead of the federal government and established state-run veterans homes. Domiciliary care was available at all state veterans homes, and incidental medical and hospital treatment was provided for all injuries and diseases, whether or not of service origin. An example is the Athens State Hospital, which was known as the Ridges, opened in 1874. In the late 19th century, it was the town's largest employer, and veterans of the Civil War were treated there. The hospital was closed in 1993, but my historical expert, Joe, tells me that it's now a haunted house or something. I don't know. Kind of spooky. In 1886, the Ohio General Assembly authorized the creation of the Ohio Soldiers and Sailors Home in Sandusky, Ohio, and it's still there. The home was created to provide for Ohio's indigent, honorably discharged veterans of the American Civil War. In 1888, the first 17 Civil War veterans arrived in Sandusky. Originally, the home provided housing and food for the veterans. Beginning in 1950, the institution also provided nursing home care. As the United States became involved in other conflicts, the home admitted honorably discharged veterans from these wars as well. Veterans from the many conflicts in the 20th century have resided up in Sandusky. It opened itself to veterans of all military branches, including the National Guard as well. And then after 1969, women veterans could also seek assistance at Sandusky. By 2005, more than 50,000 veterans had resided at what is now known as the Ohio Veterans Home. In that same year, approximately 660 veterans lived there, including 427 people in the nursing home component. And today's population is just slightly less than that. So we're keeping the facility full, and it rates very well. Whatever the inspections might be from the VA or from the Ohio Health Department, we'll read comments issued by the residents who live there. Our homes do really well, and we're proud of that. In 2000, I say homes because in 2003 we built a second one. It's much smaller, down near Cincinnati in Brown County, in the town of Georgetown. And it's a beautiful facility, sort of colonial architecture, and we're really proud of that one as well. If a veteran is destitute, he or she now receives free care at these homes. Otherwise, the homes charge a fee based on a person's financial ability. In 2011, a privately run hospice wing was opened at Georgetown at no extra cost to Ohio taxpayers. And the population in Georgetown now is about 125. So you see, it's about a quarter the size of Sandusky. Both the Sandusky and Georgetown sites are operated by our department, the Ohio Department of Veteran Services. I mentioned that there are 137 state-run veterans homes around the nation, and Sandusky is actually one of the largest. It's also one of the largest nursing homes in the state of Ohio. So I think we can be particularly pleased with our history of caring for veterans and their families. So let's take a brief look at some noteworthy programs that I've not mentioned already. Then I'll wrap up with some current facts and figures about how Ohio carries out its continuing support of veterans. It's important to point out that most of the funds expended on veterans benefits are federal dollars coming back to Ohio. They're floating around the Potomac River. We get to scoop them up and come back. And I'll show you some pretty impressive numbers of how the work that's being done in Montgomery County and around the state are producing returns for the feds, that is our money, at a huge ratio. The activities that bring these benefits to our veterans are done through VA federal facilities, and also, of course, we assist in Columbus, and once again, the real work is done at the county level. And I'll show you in a few minutes the economic impact. What's interesting about this chart, I think, is that the number of veterans, and I'll probably mention a little later, is actually decreasing in Ohio, the number. But look at the dollars coming back from Washington and how that number is growing. Part of that is because of our understanding of the more complex needs of our veterans. Recently, with some of the decisions like the Niebuhr decision concerning health effects from the Vietnam War have resulted in fairly large individual awards. But the hospitals, the exotic treatment, treating people with missing limbs and so forth is very costly. And fortunately, if there's a fortunate side of that, there is adequate funds coming back from Washington. So you see the number, $5.2 billion coming into the state from the VA because of the work that's being done in Montgomery County and around the state. So we're really pleased about that. And it's an important note in hard economic times that the work and the dollars, the Ohio tax dollars, the county tax dollars that are being spent provide such an excellent return. This gives you an idea of how that money is broken down, and medical care and operating expenses, of course, take up a big portion of the pie because it's just expensive to build and run a hospital. So that's significant. But the actual benefits that an individual accrues occupies about a third of that pie as well. So that's dollars, no matter what we may sink into our doctors and hospitals, the dollars that are coming into the individual counties at ratios of 50, 80, 100 to 1 compared to the tax dollars, the county tax dollars spent to get our veterans that compensation. Now, I talked about how the VA was put together with a number of scattered agencies that acted as bureaus under the VA. And today the VA is divided up into three essential administrations. You got health, benefits, and the cemetery administration. And each of these administrations has a distinct and significant presence in Ohio. And I think the best way to illustrate the scope of these activities is to simply show you some lists, and you can read as well as I, well, you can read better than I can, so I won't go there again, will we? Okay, the Health Administration. It's administered by a district that more or less comprises the state of Ohio, but not completely. As a matter of fact, Northwest Ohio is served by a different, we call them VISN, the Veterans Integrated Service Network. VISN 10 is essentially the state of Ohio. I'm leaning on the VA's door to try to get Northwest Ohio moved from VISN 11 which is headquartered in some M-name state, not to be mentioned, and bring those services into the state of Ohio and into Toledo, a depressed area, and not have those dollars flowing across the border. So we're working on that. It's headwinds. The VA looks at its regions by demographics. They don't look at state borders. And we have a significant number of veterans in Toledo, and they have to go up to Ann Arbor. Wow, it's just hard to say. To get treatment. Or there are other facilities that are not in the M state as well. But we don't have a big hospital in the Toledo area, just a CBOC in Lucas County. So take a look at a couple of those numbers there. 5 medical centers. Chalmers Wiley is really not a hospital in Columbus, but it's nearly a hospital. We mentioned a hospital here in Dayton. One of these days, Chalmers Wiley, easy for me to say, will be an actual hospital. Really all they need is a place for beds and an emergency room, I'm told. It's a pretty big facility for me if you've ever been over there to Columbus. And I mentioned the CBOCs, 28 of them, 88 counties, so there's not one in every county, but they try to locate them in areas where there's sort of a vacuum of VA support. The next leg of the tripod is the benefits administration, and these benefits are mainly administered through the Cleveland VA Regional Office, the VARO, if you see the Vero, see it written down. It is augmented, however, by an intake site that's located here in Dayton at Wright-Patterson. They particularly are involved in processing the retirement and separation of military members. And when I was teaching up in South Bend, and I retired then in 1995, I actually came down to Wright-Patterson. One of the initiatives that my department's taken, but I will not take credit for it because I didn't do it, my predecessor, Bill Hartnett, realized that the processing of benefits claims, and I'll show you the process here in just a minute, briefly, had a lot of snags, and then to unsnag them, often the claims form would just be sent back to the member or whatever, and just the moving back and forth of these packages just consumed an unbelievable amount of time. And so we have a state representative in the Cleveland office in that magnificent building up there that's just full of forms and people, and Mickey Volkman, and she's a veteran service officer. She's a longtime veteran and knows the business. And recently, a senior delegation came from the VA in Washington to visit the VA regional office in Cleveland, and we've been supported by the VA up there. The regional director, Joyce Cange, is just a remarkable lady and has been very supportive of what we're doing with her up there. And the VA met Mickey Volkman, and they said they're going to duplicate that program throughout the U.S. So once again, go Buckeyes, right? We're leading the pack here. So we're really pleased with that and proud of it. And my hat's off to my predecessor, Bill, for establishing that. And then the last of the triad of the VA is the cemetery administration. And I've already mentioned that there's a national cemetery in Dayton, and also one at the Ohio Western Reserve in Rittman, Ohio. Ohio does not have any state veteran cemeteries. However, veterans who pass away while they're living in Sandusky may be buried at the Sandusky home. So we actually have a small cemetery there, but it's not open to veterans in general. We just don't have the funds to run a state veteran cemetery. So the two that we have are operated by the VA. Well, this is us. So I want to just give you a few words about us. The Department of Veterans Services, when the department was created to try to differentiate between us and the VA, we were called Veteran Services, but we get called the VA, not to mention some other unmentionable names all the time. But we're Veteran Services, a state level underneath the VA in Washington. That, by the way, is on the east side of the State House in Columbus is the Veterans Memorial. If you ever get a chance to go over to Columbus and walk around the State House, there are a number of statues to veterans from different wars. And then on the east side is this really lovely Veterans Memorial Park. We conduct some ceremonies there a couple times a year with the governor. It's really, really nice. Well, to start with, you have to have a mission, and this mission seems fairly straightforward, but one of the toughest parts is the first two words, to identify. I mentioned already to you the difficulty in veterans self-identifying or knowing that they're even a veteran. And so our task for all of us in the state is to find these veterans, and part of the process is having speaking engagements just like this to tell you about what we're doing and to reach out. And if you are a veteran in need of some assistance, even if you don't think you're in need of, we really encourage you to go to your county veteran service office and talk to the folks about what benefits that you might have, that we might have for you. And you don't need to get medical benefits. You know, you might feel that you're fit and everything. Well, we've got great educational benefits, okay? So give us a chance to talk to you, and turn in your neighbor too. If you know a friend or a neighbor who's a veteran, let them know who we are and where we are. As much as we have improved our communications over time, we talk to people every day that don't even know that we have a state, much less a county, which is our big operation, that we exist. So help us out on identifying those veterans. Advocating. One of the things that's distinctly different from what we do in Columbus and what our county friends do is that we advocate for veterans in a way that we're particularly able to do as a cabinet agency, and that is we go right to the law. We go to our legislators. We have good relations with our legislators in the State House, and good relations with our legislators in Washington as well. My deputy, Jason Dominguez, and I went down to Washington and visited every one of our legislators or their staff members, gave them a presentation similar to this, no lunch involved, and told them what we're doing, okay? And we are in daily contact with our legislators in the State House, and I can see the governor anytime I want to, sit down and talk with him or his staff about what we need to do to advocate for our veterans, change the law, or avoid changes to the law that would not be helpful to our veterans. And I think it's one of the most important things that we do at the state level. Connecting them with their families, or with the veterans and the family, the connecting, once again, and I beat this many times, but you can't beat it enough, that a lot of the connection is really done at the county level. We can help that process out, though, in many ways. I need to mention, though, of course, you don't need to work with us in Ohio. You can go right to the VA. Actually, that's what I did. I was living in Indiana, and I just went to a VA hospital and applied for my benefits. You'll see if you do that a number of veteran service organizations, VFW, Legion, what have you, have offices in our hospitals and clinics, and they will assist you process your claims. So you can do that as well. You're going to get, I think, far better service in Ohio because of our county structure, however. Have I said that enough? I think I got ahead of myself just a little bit here. The department is organized into two pieces there, and talked about the homes a little bit. The other half is veteran services. The budget of my homes is far larger than services. It's expensive to run a veterans home. We have doctors and nurses and specialists. We have a police department even. So it's very, very costly in comparison to veteran services, because since most of the work is done in the county, we are an umbrella organization for the state. And under services are those three sections. The two major subcomponents are education and the bonus program, and we have a number of other activities as well. We absorbed the homes and the education programs when we became a cabinet department. The homes were administered by a board, and frankly, I don't think it's a big secret, the homes were rather a disaster. And when they were put under a single superintendent and the board was dissolved, I'm told, this happened 3 years ago, I'm told that that really made the difference to make our homes the type of facility that they should be and are to this day. We also then established the bonus program for the Iraq and Afghanistan war in the past 3 years as well, and that's administered by my department. Probably, once again, the umbrella effort that we do is to provide continuity of operations throughout the state, so that people, no matter where they live, no matter what the county is, are receiving similar services, even though the counties may differ considerably because of rural and urban and so forth, that we try to establish. And we're working really hard on doing better to have continuity of service as well. To do that, we train and certify our county veteran service commissioners, and we establish performance norms, and we establish reporting as well. And I think we're seeing good results of that. And I've already mentioned the tremendous benefit that we have of working directly with our legislators. This is the other chart. This is the going down chart versus the dollar chart that's going up. You see significant reductions. And I was talking a little while ago to Channel 7 the importance of making allowances for businesses, and especially for veterans-owned businesses and for veterans to want to live in Ohio. We have this great out-processing center here at Wright-Patterson, and guess what? People out-process and they leave, okay? We are looking at those benefits. We've been doing that continuously. A couple of years ago, there was a bipartisan bill passed to exempt veterans from state income tax to make Ohio even more attractive than it is. And we're selling ourselves all the time. We're trying to make Ohio more business-friendly so that we can bring businesses, maybe give them some tax advantages, and then, oh, guess what? They produce jobs, and people are paid, and they spend that money in the state. So we've got to turn this around. As you well know, the state population is virtually flat. That's why we lost 2 representatives in Washington. And so we're doing our part to make an Ohio the place we all love and love living in, and we're trying to pass the word, shout the word out to stop these decreasing numbers. The things that we certainly want to impress on folks in the legislature, if we need to impress them, we have good working relations, like I said. But veterans are good people to either keep or bring back to the state. Disciplined, well-trained, often in numbers of different types of professions. And those are the kind of people that we like to add to the mix of our population here. And it's certainly encouraging to see groups such as yours working to increase the number of veterans in business in Ohio. And we look forward to continuing the work. This is just the first step. So whatever we can do in the future, let's do it. Another benefit of keeping or bringing veterans back to our state is if they've retired, they're getting pretty good pensions. And many veterans branch off into other productive careers, and some of them even go to work for state agencies. And of course, I pointed out that in spite of the fact that our number of veterans is decreasing, the number of dollars coming in from the VA is actually increasing, and we're very pleased about that. It's sort of a double-edged sword. Unfortunately, the reason for the increasing numbers is there are people with problems, and that's not good. But they have the problems whether we like it or not, and we don't like it. The good side of that, though, is we're bringing the funds and the support that they need and they've earned. Veteran services. It's the heart of our operations, and it works on outreach and certainly information. Communication is one of the things that's most important to it. I've already given you illustrations about how we have to do better. When I came in January, I pulsed the different counties and found out there are only 47 of our 88 counties veterans offices had websites. And I got answers like, well, we don't have the funding or we don't have the expertise. So we helped with that. That was easy. Jeremy Gates, my IT guy, we sent him out there to help these counties. I also heard people say, well, not every veteran has a computer. You know, that's wrong thinking, okay? Okay, so they don't have a computer. A lot of veterans have them. We didn't have things like Twitter and Facebook. I mean, okay, I don't understand those things, but I do understand that people use them. My cell phone has a green button and a red button. That's me, okay? But there are folks that really know this stuff and can use it, and we need to be up to date, and we're doing that. So we have Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and my new communications guy, Mike McKinney, is dynamite. He is doing a great job there and reaching out with all the latest. And we're not forgetting the folks that don't have computers and aren't into that business as well. Okay, we don't forget anybody. We're trying to enlarge and increase our outreach. So as of today, I checked with Jeremy this morning. There are only 7 counties now, veterans offices, that don't have a web presence. So tremendous work done by Jeremy Gates in cooperation with our county offices to get them hooked up to the modern world. We have the state approving agency, and the state approving agency is linked up to how we extend educational benefits to our veterans. You get GI Bill money, you're going to go off to a school. Well, how do you know that school is accredited so that when you go there that you can be accepted and get the VA support, the benefits that you need, the GI Bill benefits? So we have a team that goes around and visits every educational institution in the state, including Ohio State. Okay, there are obviously provisions in place that we don't have to go through Ohio State's books, but you know, we touch base with every educational institution and certify that they are available. And one of the most important things that we stress with our veterans who are going after educational benefits is there are a lot of folks out there that are making millions of dollars from the GI Bill with diploma mills, okay? And they're happy to take your benefits, and then, oh, by the way, if you go into debt a little bit, you can even take more courses, and then you graduate, you get this worthless piece of paper, and you go for a job, and you're in debt, and you can't get hired because the diploma's no good. This is a serious nationwide problem. We are attacking that head on in Ohio. We are working with the chancellor, we're working with the presidents of our universities to help them to better market themselves to our veterans. And of course, we market our educational institutions. We have the finest in the world here in Ohio, and people don't have to run off to these diploma mills. And you know, there's nothing easy, right? And so we show them the way to go to the right schools, and the SAA is part of that effort to ensure that we've certified those schools so when they go, they're going to get an education and actually be able to get those VA benefits. Troops to Teachers, kind of interesting, used to be part of the Department of Education, and I had the honor of running that. Now I can't get away from it. It's like flypaper. So it's in DVS right now, and a really fine gentleman running that. And that is to take veterans and to link them up as school teachers, basing their military career, their military training. Many of these training courses can be turned into credits and then used to get ultimately a teaching certificate. And they can teach even before they get their certificate. At least they could when I was there. There were federal programs that were causing us a little bit of difficulty with that, but we worked together, and still to this day, so that our veterans that have the interest can get into the teaching programs, and they're doing tremendous work out there at schools of all kinds around the country, around the state, excuse me. The Ohio Veterans Bonus Program, let me give you a couple of facts and figures of that in case you think you might be eligible. You served in the Persian Gulf, Iraq, or Afghanistan wars, you can get $100 for each month of active duty service, up to $1,000. Eligible veterans serving on active duty elsewhere in the world during these wars may receive $50 a month, up to a maximum of $500. And eligible veterans may combine their service bonuses for a maximum payment of $1,500, and the bonus is exempt from federal and state income taxes, and is paid for with bonds, and there's plenty of money available. So if you haven't applied for your bonus, or you know someone who hasn't, give us a call, go on our website, and get yourself enrolled. And the program is working very well. Once we got started and dealt with the initial vast number of applications, we don't have a backlog. The processing is going rather smoothly. And if you hear differently about this or anything that we're doing, I sure hope you get in touch with me so that we know if we have any problems in any areas that we need to fix. The picture sort of tells the story here of some of our special programs. We have the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame that will be taking place on the 10th of November. The governor takes part in that, it's a couple of hours, a program of presentation, individual awards, are awarding the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame to deserving veterans. This year, 20 of our mates will receive that distinction. And if you've been into the Rife Center across the street from the State House in Columbus, up on the second floor of the foyer, there's this magnificent display of brass plaques with these names going back to our earliest days, and it's really an honor. And the governor takes part in that. The governor takes part in the wreath laying ceremony. You see one there with Governor Taft held at the memorial that I mentioned, and there's a picture of Governor Strickland. He's doing the Veterans Hall of Fame award a couple of years ago, and then the one at the top where Governor Kasich is presenting the French Legion of Honor. World War II veterans from that served in France and were wounded are eligible for award the French Legion of Honor. That's France's highest award. We have a beautiful ceremony we set up in the governor's office. We bring the French consulate up from Cincinnati, and we play the national anthems and have the flags, and just a wonderful ceremony. And we just conveyed 2 Legions of Honor to our 2 of our World War II veterans just a few months ago. Well, how many times have I hammered County Veteran Services, huh? Gosh, I don't know if I got Montgomery up there. I'm going to get yelled at. I just picked a few. Sorry. Need to pre-screen. I've already mentioned that veterans benefits, most of the dollars actually come from the VA, our tax money coming back to Ohio, delivered through VA facilities and from pension and disability payments. But once again, it's the county that links our veterans to those benefits. It starts with the Veteran Service Commission. There are 5 Veteran Service Commissioners in most counties. Montgomery has 11. And they're appointed by the county common pleas judge, or in the case of Montgomery County, there are 6 of them appointed by the county commissioners. They in turn hire an executive director, and they set up and run the Veteran Service Office and hire staff. In the case of funding for these offices, it comes from the county. 0.5 mil of assessed real estate value, up to that amount, goes to the county veterans office. In some counties, that's really great. Montgomery, Cuyahoga, Summit, Franklin, big counties, Hamilton, I think. Little counties like Vinton County gets a little because it's established on this 0.5 mil that they barely can turn the lights on. So one of the things that we're looking at in better economic times that we keep praying for is that we'll be able to do something from the state level for these smaller counties that are really scraping with the funds available to them to take care of our veterans. Of that 0.5 mil, if you add it up and put it in one stack of gold, it would be, if it were all spent, it's $120 million. And yet last year, the dollars actually spent by the counties was only $50 million. So there's actually a tremendous amount of reserve. And I'm sure the county commissioners don't say, they're not putting that money out in the street. They're spending it for other important programs. But there is in the big counties, especially, even where I live in Fairfield County, that doesn't spend its entire 0.5 mil. There is a way to increase our services to our veterans, and I really preach to the county commissioners that they need to do that. And they're not going to be stealing a sheriff's deputy or reducing some program, because when you have a return of 50 to 80 to 100 to 1 on the dollar spent, it goes right back into the county. It's a good investment, and oh, by the way, we're helping our veterans, and isn't that what we should be thinking of first of all? The office provides these services, and you can read them as well as I. And I give the example of probably the largest county, Cuyahoga. The $16 million that's available for them, they don't spend all that. They spend about 40% of it. And Vinton County spends every penny of it. And actually, I was just down there recently. The county commissioner's trying to give them a few extra bucks, and it's tough. We're hoping this shale thing turns everything around. If you get out there and visit southeastern Ohio, all the courthouses are full of extra desks. They're going through deeds like crazy, and there's gold in our hills, I'll tell you. And of course, the bottom line there tells you the story as well. The different counties vary greatly in the size of their staff and therefore the services that they render. lots of them. Try to highlight the differences where they might come from. One of the most important things also having a county person, they know their neighbors. You can sit down with that person and fill out your claim form face to face. Although the VA is also working on a program that you can go telephonically and sit down and with a living person live up in Cleveland, and they can sit and walk you through filling out a claim face to face. They've only tried that up in Lucas County as a test program, but we hope to expand that. And now you're bypassing a lot of steps to make the process faster. And it's not particularly fast, okay? This is a brief sketch of how it works. Hopefully you'll go to your CVSO, your County Veteran Service Office, and at some point though the claim is going to go to Cleveland, and then it'll be reviewed by one of the veteran service organizations, VFW, the Disabled American Veterans, what have you, and then it's passed on for development of the claim, and then it's rated, and then a decision is sent down to the veteran, and you see ODVS liaison. That's Mickey Volkman, one person right now. We're hoping to increase that, and she does a tremendous amount of good work in some of these little snags that come up. Instead of sending the form back to the veteran, they call Mickey and she says, oh, we can get this, and she gets on the phone or gets on the fax machine, and so it tries to lubricate the system. And there's a big backlog. The VA doesn't like to call it that. Now, I'm not slamming the VA. They call it inventory. But there are a number of forms that are still sitting up there, and if you ever want to be scared by mountains of paperwork, just go up to Cleveland and go into the claims office. My gosh, I don't know how they do it. Just one of these sci-fi movies of carts moving around with stacks and stacks of forms, but they do it. They keep track of it. This is a breakdown of some of the services that are offered at the county level, more specifically to the first list I showed you, so you can admire those for just a few moments. By the way, the volume of claims up in the Cleveland office in Ohio, it's about 2,000 a month. We also like to point out that if you go for a claim and you do it yourself, you're likely to get up to 40% less of a decision that you go through our county offices and let them sit down and help you to really ask the right questions. That shoulder that's bothering you, you say, well, you know, I've been bothering me for a long time. Well, maybe you fell off a tank back 25 years ago and you didn't remember that. Well, it's probably in your medical records, and now it's turned into arthritis. Okay, so get help when you do these things, and tell your friends that as well. I just found out about an interesting one up in Ottawa County yesterday. Down there, military awards assistance. I'm researching this because it sounds just unbelievable to me. But World War II veterans, I think if you qualify for the Combat Infantry Badge, you're eligible for the Bronze Star Medal. I just learned that yesterday. So we're working that hard. I mean, I just learned it. Up in Ottawa County, they're dispensing these things by the hundreds to World War II vets. You know, I guess I'm always the cynic, right? But I'm looking at this hard. So I mentioned it to you. You know, it's in quotes right now. Don't go out and do a BX and buy a BSM right now. But we're going to verify this. I'm not insulting our friends in Ottawa County, but I have to be responsible. And we'll verify this and get the word out to all of our counties. Were you aware of that? I had never heard of it. So this is fantastic, extremely generous, and so we'll be getting the word out on that award to World War II veterans earning the Bronze Star Medal, depending on certain criteria. Well, let's close with some numbers of how it stacks up. We actually perform rather favorably compared to the rest of the nation, but we really have a lot of work to do to identify more of our veterans and connecting them to their benefits. And let's show a few here. Oh gosh, how did Michigan get highlighted?
Sneaky.
So if you're looking at expenditures per veteran, okay, remember $5.2 billion. We rank 6th in population across the nation, veterans population, about 890,000. And you divide that up with our around 5.2 billion, I guess you come up with $5,900 per veteran. That's ranking 8th. Not bad, okay? You can see our friend up north doesn't do as well. We also do well in compared to other large states. I think that's good also. You know, you got to try to do apples and apples. Little states may have an easier time finding and connecting veterans. So we're pretty pleased with that. Where we don't do so well is in total compensation. We rank 46th. Okay, that's not good. And I think the reason for that is we don't know who all our veterans are. Okay, we've got programs in place. We're going to add more programs. We have a relationship with ODOT. If you go in and apply for a driver's license or license plate, there's a form you can fill out and you can check veteran. And when you do that, we get your name and address. With all the privacy controls and everything, they won't give us a phone number and they won't give us an email address. So we have to send you a letter, okay? And I'm not knocking ODOT, they're wonderful in it. I'm glad to have this MOU in place. But it's still, you know, in the paper side, so we have to pay for a stamp and put that letter out. Remember, we're talking 900,000 people, and we're only in contact with maybe 15 or 20% of them. So the cost is huge, but it's a step. And we've got some other ideas cooking as to how we can work with our counties and identify more of our veterans and connect them to their benefits. Okay, economic stimulus. This is real economic stimulus. In spite of the improvements that we want to make in our delivery systems, we really do pretty well in return of tax money. Once again, $5.2 billion. And in my budget alone, which largely is my veterans' homes, only 33% of it is your Ohio tax money. Okay, the rest of it is your tax money too, but it's coming back. So the numbers are good in that respect. We are good stewards of your money, and I think our results are pretty good. We're not happy though. We're not satisfied certainly at where we're at, and we want to do more. And it's important that we end, I think, on this note. Every day we honor our veteran service and connect them to their benefits, as I've said. But we'll never forget our veterans who have passed and are passing every day into history. Each one of them was a human being. It wasn't just a number. They lived lives, they had families, and of course, they had names. All of us in this room can bring those faces to mind. As Guy Chapman put it, their living face. Thanks.
Colonel Moe has agreed to take any of your questions, so if you've got a few minutes, but any questions? Wally.
Yes, ma'am. Oh.
Yes, at the state law, like the federal government, they use a goal of 3%. The state has a lot of projects that they could get some legislation in to give veterans 3% of the state money.
Say that again. 3% of what money?
State money, you know, state
quota on contracts.
Yeah. There's none.
Okay, we'll take that back to the State House. Did you get a card of mine? You know, I'd really appreciate some issues like that you would actually email me more detailed. What you okay?
Because it's, you know, it's not the cost to the state or anything, but it'll make these contractors and customers do this. But don't do like the federal government, just make it a goal. You gotta make it mandatory.
There is a program for the state. It's called EDGE, and that will put you head of the class, I guess you could say, for getting state programs. And
there are no set-asides.
No set-asides.
And there are no requirements
right.
that the state spend 3% with service-disabled veteran-owned businesses.
The only thing you got is what I said, EDGE, E-D-G-E.
And NAVOBA has been lobbying in the state of Ohio now for years trying to get this passed, and we've gotten zero response out of the State House.
They're trying to break into these good old boys clubs that just not gonna let you so.
We will be taking this up with Colonel Moe after this, so I don't want to get too far down that road. We had a question here.
You said you wanted to reach out more. I know at my agency, we deal on the human service side, so are you working, playing in the sandbox with human services? And that includes a question for you guys, because I get a lot of veterans, particularly the younger generation, I would say my generation and younger, that are coming through or coming back. So how are you going to capture them? Are you going to work more with human services to capture them? Because they're going through that particular side for benefits, for job search, for training. So there's a whole nother population out there that really do not know anything about this.
You'll have to help me on structure. Is human services part of JFS?
Yeah, job and family human services.
Yeah.
Like for example, I had a Marinesman that came to our office. Leslie here, my staff could contest to that. He walked from Poe Avenue to my office on Salem just to get help. And I get a lot of that. They take the bus, they do whatever they have to, but they're out there, but you're right, they're not knowing about anything.
Yeah, there's two pieces to the answer. Of course, if it's a veteran, they need to somehow contact whatever county they live in, the county veteran service office. Okay. There's even transportation available. What county would this be?
This is Montgomery.
Okay. You got your neighbor sitting right there. Okay. That's number one. Number two, I know the director of JFS personally, Mike Colbert, and we talk veterans issues vis-a-vis JFS. There's some job programs and so forth, special job programs at JFS. So we are tuned to a broad band of these issues and where we might have gaps. And one way to fill those gaps is to have communication from folks out there seeing it firsthand. So we'd like to hear from you on detailed suggestions. Pretty difficult to get a broad comment and then to know how to go to work on it, okay? But once again, if it's a veteran, go to the County Veteran Service Office or get hold of them, go to their vehicles, okay? So even transportation is available, okay, to have them work it at the county level. It's where the rubber meets the road for veterans, okay?
One of the things, if I could piggyback.
Please do.
Colonel Moe said that we're seeing in Montgomery County, and I'm sure it's throughout the state, there are a lot of agencies that find out that there's benefits for veterans, but what happens is there's no assessment, or when they have their assessment tool, what we're finding is there's no assessment for veterans. So people are coming in and they have these veterans, and until somebody says, how many veterans do you have? Well, we really don't know. So something that you may want to do, and you certainly can call me, but you may want to have as part of your assessment tool when people come for you for services, that they can identify themselves to you as a veteran.
This is a huge challenge, assessment. We've got an initiative going. We just started working on it a couple of months ago. It's not talk, okay? It's a real program that we have put together 4 departments in action on this: DVS, Department of Aging, JFS, and Health Transformation. Okay, we first 4 directors sat down, and then we got the work, the people to do the real work out there. And what we're doing is identifying our veterans throughout the state who are in nursing homes. They're on Medicaid. That's state tax dollars going to people who already qualify in most cases for VA money. Okay, it's our money already sitting there in Washington. So what we're doing is we're building this program to identify the veterans in our nursing homes, then to assess them whether they're eligible for VA benefits, and then move them over to the VA side as long as those benefits aren't less than they're receiving from Medicaid. Just another example. But assessment, identification, assessment, identification. It's a daily challenge to us, and we're opening up new programs every day and ways to find those people and have them come forward to us, or us to find them and go to them, okay, and to be able to connect them to their benefits, okay?
One more question, please.
Recently, we looked at hiring people, and we tried to hire a veteran. In fact, we did. We hired a new manager, ex-military. We're a small company, but we have 4 veterans within 12 people. Mm-hmm. The problem I found out was, and I know maybe we just don't know where to look, it doesn't seem to be any program that's existent for all these young guys coming out and my nephew's one of them, he doesn't live in this state, that came out of the service, and there's no way to say, I'm a veteran and I'm looking for a job, and here's my skills. I was a engine mechanic on tanks, or I repaired helicopters, where somebody like me that has a company and says, I need a guy that knows how to repair engines. I could go into a site and say, here's a veteran, and this guy repaired diesel engines. That's the guy I'm looking for. I could not find anything like that. Is this something that we just didn't miss, or there is no such thing?
Well, the National Guard, when it brings people back from duty and discharges them, there's job counseling there. The TAP program has job counseling there, essentially a mini job fair.
But how do industry go and find those? See, you're saying they give them counseling and they take information, and that I understand.
So how do you find them?
How do I, as a company, go and say, look, I want to find a veteran because they're a veteran site, and I want to know a guy that knows, instrumentation. Maybe he did military information on fighters. The guy that works for us as quality control manager, his specialty was instrumentation on helicopters.
The first step is to advertise that you hire vets.
Well, we do that, but I'm just saying there's no agency set up that I can go in and type on my computer and say, here's what I'm looking for. You got anybody on your site?
Give Joe your contact information. We could chat more about that.
It's not necessarily an answer. You're right. There isn't necessarily a database, but the state has veteran employment specialists in every county.
And there are some of those.
And the one name here, I don't have his phone number memorized, but it's Harry Edwards.
Yeah.
And he is a veterans specialist, so he's someone in his office is at the job center that you could contact. They used to have a program called the OTAP, the Ohio Transition Assistance Program, and ODJVS changed that, but there are literally probably several hundred names that they have that attended that, because one of our requirements for some of the benefits in our office was that if the veteran was unemployed, that they go and attend that.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of veterans in Montgomery County and Greene County that attended those workshops, and they were a couple days, and they would have employers come in and they would do resume preparation, so on and so forth. So if you would call at the job center on Edwin C. Moses for Harry Edwards, that's what his department does. I just don't have his number. I apologize for not having his number.
These are what the Department of Labor referred to as the one-stop centers. And there's two representatives, each one of them. They're called local veteran employment representatives and disabled veteran outreach representatives, called the DVOT program, which was established by DOL in 1977. There's less of those now. I think there's like 38, 39 of those representatives. You can actually put a job rec a requirement in to the one-stop center for what you're looking for, and they'll do the research for you.
And that's where we look.
Yeah, they'll do that.
We didn't find it very easily.
Okay.
We can provide you more information.
Joe will work with you. Let's thank Colonel Moe again for his. Thank you again for coming. We want to encourage you to join VOB108 if you're a business person. This is your first time, first exposure to us. There are members around. They have the black shirts on with the VOB108 logo. Pull one of those folks aside and join up with us. We'll tackle this together. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.